Friday, July 24th here at Cape Ann. Today, Heather and I are back again with another great show for you. First of all, we're going to lead with Erika Brown. She's the publisher and editor of the Manchester Cricket. She always fills us in on the latest news from Manchester and Essex. Today, she's going to talk about the Mill Restaurant, which is thriving over by where Schooners is on Eastern Avenue, as well as the passing of Jay Severin.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey, happy Friday. Listen, we've got several things going on here this week in Manchester. It's been pretty quiet, though, I have to say. But with that said, we have some interesting things that I wanted to maybe share with you guys. The first one is we had last week, we talked about Christina St. Pierre. We went to the funeral for that. It was very sad. One thing I didn't mention last week, and that was on Spring Street at the cemetery in Essex. There were probably about 200 people there, all socially distanced. It was really beautiful and sad affair. But I wanted to mention that in lieu of flowers, that they were asking for donations to go to the Mass General Neuro-Oncology Fund, Research Fund. So you should check that out. But anyway, Jay Severin, we had another community passing. And then Jay Severin, do you remember Jay Severin?
Titan on talk radio.
Exactly. He was a really big kind of controversial a presence on local radio here in Boston, but he really had a big career that was national and nationally recognized. And in journalism, he graduated as a journalist student in the first co-ed class in Vassar. From there, he went on and he did work in consulting and spoke with, everyone from the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Los Angeles Times, and he ended up settling in radio and doing quite a lot with a conservative radio talk show host. But what's odd is he started off, I'm so sorry. Did you hear that? A dog just came in?
On its own?
No, it's okay. So Jay Severin passed away last week. Do you remember Jay Severin?
He's a Titan on talk radio.
Yes, I think a Titan is actually true. He was certainly a Titan in Boston, and people probably thought he was just a Boston conservative talk show host that was kind of a fixture over the last probably 20 plus years. What you probably don't know is that he really registered on the national landscape pretty significantly. He was a longtime journalist, worked with New York Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune. It seemed endless. And he made appearances on CNN, MSNBC, the whole thing. He was one of the original kind of political pundits that would get on and provide commentary. He ended up probably becoming most famous for insulting pretty nastily Hillary Clinton late in his career. And he did the back nine of his career with Glenn Beck on his sort of independent internet channel. So that's what people think of him. What I found most interesting about him, and he lived in Manchester for probably 15 years. He and his wife had a daughter who graduated from the public school system here. And he was just, one of our residents. And he started his career being really close to extremely liberal activists. Abby Hoffman, he spoke at Abby Hoffman's funeral. Abby Hoffman, the creator of the Yippies, the Youth International Party, I believe, which was supposed to be the left of left party that was part of the Chicago 7 in 1968. It's funny, we haven't thought about those people for a really long time, but now it seems like with all the protests and everything, we feel like we might be back in 1968. But it's so interesting that he started his career with Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, and Tom Hayden, who married Jane Fonda. And then from that to Glenn Beck, I found to be such an interesting career.
Pretty wild. And I think he actually finished up, he was hosting a weekend show out of Gloucester.
You're kidding?
Yeah, WBOQ, I think.
I remember him from Boston, and I think it was WTKK. And but it's just something that's very apropos of now. Yeah. Another thing
I was going to say, what else did we do this week?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think I was jumping you, but another thing we did this week, which kind of felt nice because it felt like we were jumping back before COVID, was we did a nice piece. Chris McGinn-Straub, who is just always fantastic for us, she did a piece on the Mill Restaurant. Josh and Caitlin Silverstein, I believe.
Yes.
Caitlin. Yeah. the Silversteins. Well, Josh grew up in Manchester. He is, I think of him as Stephanie Nahatis's son. But Josh and Caitlin Silverstein, they opened up the mill, sort of a sandwich shop, but very, I say upscale, because it's sandwiches and provisions and just real specialty foods. It's delicious. And it's over on Southern Avenue, if I remember correctly. And
it's right next to Schooners, where the Schooners building.
I was going to say, it's right next to Schooners and Essex Pet and Bird Supply.
Exactly, yep.
Yeah. Anyway, they opened up in late February. So do the math on that. I mean, they were opening and we were supposed to do a story on them. We had already targeted them. We'd already started talking to them, and then COVID hit. Well, I'll tell you, one sandwich that got my attention was the breakfast banh mi, which is a Vietnamese sandwich, which you would never associate with breakfast, but they put an egg on it. And it's delicious. Anyway. So we did a really great piece on them, and it's really nice to see them back hitting their stride, back in business. So I love that.
I can tell you, Erika, that I was frequenting them once COVID hit, and they were actually doing well. Because I spoke with Josh, and by the way, the bacon, cheddar, and scallion quiche is awesome too.
Oh, try that.
So I'm glad they're getting their footing over there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hope they do. I want them to do well. They definitely hit, they plug a hole that exists in Essex for sort of provisions, because there's no supermarket. And so it's almost like a little bit of a, a gourmet go and get what you want, but then also there's sandwiches and salads and prepared foods. It's really, anyway.
Corey, I remember Jay Severin. He was the voice of conservative radio, and I think conservative radio has gotten a lot louder since then.
Yeah, he was in the game for a long, long time. So condolences to the family there. Heather and I also want to do something special today because it's the end of the week. And we wanted to call more attention to Kim Smith's interview that we had this past Monday in her gorgeous little documentary trailer on monarch butterflies. And she gives us literally like the A to Z on monarch butterfly behavior. And then she included, Heather, like the most gorgeous imagery for us.
It's so beautiful. And the monarch butterflies are beginning to show up. So we feel as if it is particularly pertinent this week.
That's right. And we want to say, like, as soon as this interview was done, you saw 2 in your garden that day.
I did. Yeah.
All right, here it is, folks. The latest from Kim Smith, who we also want to mention is going to have a long story next week about the piping plovers and marshmallow and how that little guy is doing down at Good Harbor Beach. So anyway, here's Kim talking about monarch butterflies.
We're located on Cape Ann at 43 degrees latitude, and the monarchs, right now we're having a little bit of a slow season with the monarchs. They are getting off to a very slow start, actually. And that's partly because when they're migrating northward, if we don't have any west to east winds, they'll pretty much stick to a straight northward trajectory. So even though friends who are in Canada and in Ontario at 49 degrees latitude, they've already been raising them for over a month. We've hardly seen anything over on the east. So that's one issue with why the monarchs are delayed. Another is the population plummeted by the eastern monarch population, apparently plummeted by half. It's a little difficult to, again, so we used to count the monarchs in the billions, and it's just slowly, progressively gone down. And I can even send you a bar graph if you'd like of how the population is looking, but they count them, they measure by how many hectares they cover in the 12 volcanic mountaintops in Mexico. And we're having, it was half again as much. Last year was an uptake, about 6.8. This year it's only, or 6.4. This year it's only like 2.8 or something like that. So it was very, very off, despite what seemed like a beautiful year last year. With everybody had tons of butterflies. They got off to a really good early start, but then I think they kind of crashed when they were migrating southward because there was a drought in Texas. And when they get to these, southern areas, if there's not a lot of wildflowers to help fortify them on their southward migration, then they're not gonna make it all the way to Mexico. So I always tell people that the most important things to plant are for their northward migration is milkweeds, common milkweed, marsh milkweed, Those are the two. Common's the most productive for females depositing eggs. But then they also need tons and tons of nectar plants on there while they're here during the summer and on their southward migration. And that fortifies them while they're on their north and southward migratory routes. So you always want to have something blooming in your garden, no matter what time the monarchs arrive. So I even had, one year I even had, I think it was the year Obama was elected, and I called him my Obama monarch because he was here on election day, and I had flowers blooming for him. So that was my Obama monarch. So you have to, you want to have, whether they, last year was unusual when they arrived so early because of a big rainstorm in Texas that got a whole bunch of butterflies off to a good start. And then we were seeing them in early June. And so now people think, this year they think, oh, well, how come the butterflies aren't here? I saw them last year in early June, but last year was a very unusual year. So they were here too early last year. And well, not too early, they were just here early. So did you want to know more about the basic life cycle of the monarch?
Yeah. Review for people that they start in Mexico, and
they start in Mexico, right?
To Mexico, and you could describe that for us too.
A little bit of Mexico. Oh, well, it's last year I was there when they were leaving, and it was so spectacularly beautiful. It was something happens when, as the earth starts to warm in the spring, you have these phenomenal things called butterfly explosions, where the butterflies need to either get water or move to a cooler part of the mountain because the sun starts to get so hot. So millions of butterflies will leave the trees all at once, and you can see it in I think I have a clip of it in my trailer, but it's just extraordinary. And then, then they are moving all around for a couple hours, and then they come back and settle in. So, but there's a lot of, things that were blooming when I was there were like pineapple salvia and things like that. So there's a lot of nectar plants available for them because it's sort of their nice February, the end of February, early March. They leave around the spring equinox. So there's a lot of things blooming in Mexico at that time. And they start traveling northward. So these monarchs that are sleeping in the winter are basically dormant or in a state of sexual immaturity, known as diapause. These monarchs are called the Methuselah monarchs, and they have lived for almost 8 months, which is a very, very long time for a butterfly. Most butterflies only live for about, a month or so, most butterfly life cycles. And the monarchs that are here traveling northward, they only live for about a month. So these Methuselah monarchs, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but these Methuselah monarchs wake up in Mexico. They travel another 1,000 miles northward to the first holdover position in Texas, and they mate and lay eggs of the next generation along the way, and then they die. And then it takes 3 or 4 generations to gradually move northward. So, and then they go northward and they start moving a little bit eastward, a half a degree or so. So that's how most of the monarchs travel straight up through the center of the country, but then we also get many that, are shifting slightly eastward. It's all, they're pulled by sun compass, by the sun. They have, and also along the inner margins of their thorax, they have magnetic receptors that help pull them northward. And it's the same magnetic receptors that help pull them southward as well in their southward journey. So it takes 4 to 5 generations to come northward. They're mating and laying eggs of the next generation all along the way, and they're looking for milkweed on which to lay their eggs. So finally, they get to Cape Ann, usually around July 4th in a typical year, and some may stay here for a generation or 2, and some may travel even further north to Canada. And then towards what we see in our area around the 3rd week in September is this last generation that hatches here is called the Methuselah monarchs. And they're the ones that travel all the way to Mexico, which is very unique. They're not like birds, which flap their wings the entire way. They have to travel along tailwinds. So when there's a headwind, they have to stop and rest and refuel. And that's when they need good sources of nectar. So the monarchs that hatch towards the end of the summer, they're the super generation, the Methuselah monarchs, and they're the ones that are the special ones that travel all the way to Mexico. They're not interested in mating. Well, some are, but most aren't. And they're the ones that arrive in Mexico. So, and it's about a 2,500 mile journey on average. And then, and that's what people usually think of it as, but these same Methuselah monarchs, when they wake up, they travel for another 1,000 miles. So that's really like one butterfly that weighs as much as a paper clip traveling 3,500 miles. I mean, when you think about it, it's pretty extraordinary.
Amazing.
Extraordinary. Yeah.
Amazing. So, do these Methuselah monarchs, which may be hatching in our gardens around September, October?
Yeah. They'll around here, they're mostly hatching at the end of August, beginning of September. And what we see often, especially like along the coastline, is they're coming from Canada and they start gathering in greater and greater numbers. And they use the larger numbers when they're gathering like that, and they form these overnight roosts. And that's what I've been filming out on Eastern Point. These overnight roosts help protect them from the wind and keep them warm too, because oftentimes the temperatures drop in the autumn overnight. So yeah.
You see them out there on Eastern Point, these.
Yeah, so actually all around, people don't know about it, but they often go to the same trees year after year. And it's not because they have any memory of it. I think it's just purely location. But there's some in Beverly and Manchester that people have told me about that are in their yards that they see the monarchs on every year. And especially places like Point Pelee, which is another big monarch way station. So I think, this is my own personal viewpoint, I think that they use lighthouses as beacons and portals to shorelines, because when they're coming across the Lake Erie, they mass in tremendous numbers and roost around the lighthouse there. After they leave Cape Ann, they head down to Westport, Mass. And there isn't a lighthouse there, but there's the old fire towers that people used during I think they used them during World War I or World War II. So there's the old fire towers, and there's oftentimes around lighthouses and these old towers, there's also a lot of wildflowers. So then after they go from Cape Ann to Westport, and you can see on the map how it goes really. Then they're in New York along Coney Island, Battery Park. They travel along the coast. But then the next huge jumping off point right at the mouth of the Delaware River there is Cape May, New Jersey. And they have a beautiful lighthouse there as well at Cape May. And then just north of that, they also roost at Stone Harbor. And there's a very famous water tower there that was painted by Peter Max in the 1970s, very colorfully. So that's another place where they gather as well. So, and it's the same in California around with the Western population, how they gather around they roost around lighthouses. So it's pretty interesting, I think.
That is really interesting. And the sense that they're often in an open space with wildflowers, these lighthouses.
Yes, yeah. And also, like, I imagine when they're traveling, from the islands off of Canada, what do they see when they're traveling? I mean, the only thing that's really sticking out is a lighthouse. So, and oftentimes lighthouses have lots of wildflowers planted, just growing naturally around them. So
to summarize right now, if the fact that I don't have any monarchs in my garden right now, I should feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, well, you should to some degree. We have fewer and fewer butterflies every year of all species across the board because every time people plant a new home or build a shopping mall, you're building on most often you're building on a meadow, and meadows are what we have the greatest, our greatest loss of habitat, I think. And meadows don't just support butterflies, but they support many species of pollinators. And because New England has gradually become more of a forest and is so much more less agrarian, we have fewer and fewer meadows. And so the whole population is going down across the board, are going down little by little. But I'm very hopeful because so many people are planting pollinator gardens, planting habitat gardens, doing everything they can to help the butterflies and the bees as well. So I wouldn't be too worried. I just feel I'm a little, like I'm 90% certain we will see monarchs, but I don't know if they're going to be in the numbers that they were last year. And just know that the population was in half again this year. And so one thing that's a little bit exciting for me is that it might be declared an endangered threatened species, which would actually help the butterflies tremendously, because I think federal funding might go towards helping them, and it would help, it would really increase their awareness. With additional federal funds, we could, like, for example, like our own Eastern Point Lighthouse, like I would love to restore the habitat there. It's turned largely into lawn. And so what if we planted, a huge field of seaside goldenrod? Now there's just like little pockets here and there, and it's also a lot of Phragmites is taking over and things like that. But what if we had, additional funding for that? It would be pretty awesome for that. So, and it's not just, I mean, it's all through. I know that in the Midwest, they're planting monarch corridors, milkweed corridors for the butterflies. And it doesn't just help the monarchs, it helps all species of pollinators.
So how can people learn more about the monarchs? Do you want to reference your site?
Yeah. So I have I post all the time on my Kim Smith Designs website, kimsmithdesigns.com. And then I also have my Monarch Butterfly Film website, which is monarchbutterflyfilm.com. I can't believe I was able to get that domain right. So, and then also my Monarch Butterfly Film, which came out in February, which nobody's seen because of coronavirus. And my preview that was scheduled at Gloucester Stage has been indefinitely postponed, but I think people may be able to see it if they participate in the New Haven Documentary Film Festival, which I was just accepted to. So that might be one way. And I'm also seriously considering checking out the Marini Farm and Topsfield Fair drive-ins, because I thought, oh, what a fun thing to do would be to have a local premiere at a drive-in. So I'm investigating that as well. So.
Cool.
Corey, what have we missed? I know you're burning up with questions, and I.
Well, I just want to know, Kim, where the fascination began for you.
Years ago, I've always loved nature and being out, being outdoors. And my favorite classes in school were always my biology classes. But then I took a path of becoming an artist. And when we first moved to our home, I was very interested in fragrant plants and plants for cutting. And fragrant plants attract a lot of monarchs. So I started seeing all these beautiful monarchs and other species of butterflies in my garden, and I just, I'm basically a greedy person. I just wanted more. So yeah, so that really started it. It was just a love of scented flowers that you could cut and bring indoors, and that led to the interest in butterflies. But then another thing happened, that when my oldest child went off to college, I was very blue about that. I mean, I just thought, oh, that's the end of the family unit. And, you know, we just had a very close family. And of course, she was only at BU, which was, you know, we saw each other every weekend, right? And once a week for lunch or whatever. So, but that very summer, that very end of the summer, it was, we had an extraordinary monarch migration. So I thought, oh, I'm going to make this little children's book. So I started photographing the monarchs for a reference for later on when I was working on the illustrations for the book. And I met Joe and Helen Garland there. I stopped to take a picture of them. And then we started talking. And so one evening I was watching all the butterflies pouring in, and I said, the next time they come, I'm going to have the ability to document this on film. And that's how I started doing filmmaking as well. And then later that year, Joe invited me to have a photo exhibit at the Sawyer Free Library with all the photos. And so it just kind of, the monarchs kind of turned into a life of their own kind of thing. So, yeah.
I love that. So they led you down this new artistic path.
Yeah, the monarchs. Yeah, definitely. That's why I'm making films, right? Yeah. So isn't that good?
Yeah.
It's a good thing, right?
Yeah. Well, we are hoping the best for the monarchs this year, even though they're diminished so much in population leaving Mexico. And we hope to catch up with you maybe in the fall. We'll find out how they're doing.
Oh yeah, I would love to do that. Let's see how that will, you know, hopefully we'll have some premieres scheduled and things like that as well.
That would be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.